Lightning split the sky above Boston like a blade wrapped in ice. The storm had arrived without warning, turning the streets into rivers of black water and shattered light. Inside the Meridian Hotel, the marble lobby gleamed under crystal chandeliers, all polished surfaces and the kind of quiet that only exists in places where money has learned to whisper instead of shout. Cassandra Morales pushed through the revolving door at 9:48 in the evening, soaking wet, her uniform clinging to her skin like a second layer of shame. The left side of her face was swollen completely shut, her eye a dark purple crescent, the surrounding skin blooming in shades of black and blue that looked almost botanical in their detail. Her throat bore the unmistakable marks of a hand that had gripped hard enough to bruise, 5-finger impressions vivid and terrible against her pale skin. The collar of her hotel uniform hung torn, one seam completely separated, exposing her shoulder where more bruises bloomed like storm clouds. She was carrying a silver tray of champagne glasses. Her hands shook as she moved through the lobby, her other eye locked straight ahead, refusing to see the guests who turned to stare. The tray trembled with each step, and a single drop of rain fell from her hair onto the marble floor with a sound like a whisper. From a leather sofa near the fireplace, a small voice called out, "Miss Cassie." Cassandra froze. The champagne glasses caught the light as her body went rigid. A child sat there, a girl, perhaps 6 years old, with delicate Asian features and eyes that did not track movement the way other eyes do. The girl's eyes were clouded, milky, the irises swimming behind a veil of white. She was reaching one small hand toward the sound of Cassandra's breathing, her fingers opening and closing in the air like she was trying to catch something only she could feel. The girl's hand found Cassandra's trembling wrist. "Miss Cassie, from the Sunday shelter? You gave me the butterfly stickers. You let me sleep in the warm room when it was so cold I couldn't stop shaking." The child's voice was high and clear and utterly certain. "I remember your hands. They were always gentle." In that moment, the shadows near the fireplace shifted. A man rose from a chair positioned so perfectly in the darkness that it seemed he had been waiting there forever. Vincent Conti was early 40s, Korean-American, built like someone who had spent his entire life making difficult decisions with his body. He wore a 3-piece suit in charcoal black, the fabric so fine it caught the light differently than ordinary cloth, worth more than everything Cassandra owned multiplied by 10. His shirt was white and open at the collar, and across the line of his jaw ran a scar that started below his left ear and curved toward his mouth like a signature written in violence. His eyes locked onto Cassandra's injuries. Then he looked at the child's hand in hers. His face went white. Absolutely white, the color draining as if someone had pulled a plug and let all his blood run out onto the floor. His jaw tightened so hard the muscles at his temples began to pulse. "Ava," he said. His voice came out like gravel. Like something being dragged across broken glass. The child's entire body lit up with joy. "Papa! This is the nice lady. The one who let me sleep when I was scared." Two men stepped forward from opposite corners of the lobby, both massive, both dressed in expensive suits that fit like promises, both moving with a kind of coordinated precision that only comes from years of training. One was Rocco, with a neck as thick as a telephone pole and hands that looked like they had been used to reshape the world. The other was Enzo, scarred across his knuckles in a pattern that suggested he preferred direct conversation. Vincent raised one hand, just the fingers, a small gesture that stopped them both cold. He stared at Cassandra Morales. At her swollen eye. At the handprint bruises on her throat. At the way she stood there holding a tray of champagne like it was the only thing keeping her from dissolving into the marble floor. "How long have you had her?" His voice was steady now, but beneath the steadiness ran something dark and dangerous. Something that made the air in the lobby feel thinner. Cassandra could not speak. Her mouth opened. Closed. The champagne glasses continued their small trembling symphony, crystal against silver. 3 weeks, she whispered. Vincent's hands clenched into fists. Once. Then again. His knuckles turned white with pressure. "Her name is Ava," Cassandra continued, each word arriving separate and broken. "That's what she told me. She was at the shelter during the storm, 2 Sundays ago. She was so cold. She couldn't stop shaking. No one came to get her, and I have a small apartment, and she couldn't stay at the shelter because the director said there was no funding anymore, and She trailed off. The rest of the truth hung in the air between them. Vincent closed his eyes. He was silent for so long that the only sound in the lobby became the distant rumble of thunder and the soft patter of rain against the floor-to-ceiling windows. When he opened his eyes, he looked at Ava. "Did she hurt you?" he asked softly. Ava shook her head. "She braided my hair. She read stories. She made soup with vegetables and let me help." Rocco and Enzo exchanged a look that neither man had ever exchanged before. In 15 years of working for Vincent Conti, they had never seen him stand in a public lobby speaking to a woman like she was anything except a problem to be solved. They had never seen his hands unclench so slowly. Never seen his shoulders drop like something inside him had finally exhaled. Vincent reached down and took Ava's other hand. His fingers were gentle in a way that suggested they had had practice, which they had not. He knelt down so his face was level with hers, and he looked at her like she was the first honest thing he had seen in decades. "We're going to walk upstairs now," he said. His voice came out like thunder that had learned to be soft. "We are going to get you warm and dry, and we are going to have dinner in the restaurant, and you are going to eat whatever you want. Understand?" Ava nodded. Vincent straightened and looked at Cassandra. His eyes held something unreadable, something that moved behind his pupils like a shark beneath dark water. "You will come with us," he said. It was not a question. But what Cassandra did not know was that Vincent Conti had spent 22 days tearing Boston apart looking for his daughter. He had called in every favor, broken every rule, put pressure on every person who had ever owed him anything. The police had told him to wait. The authorities had said she would likely be found safe within 72 hours. Statistics, they said. Most children are located within 3 days. But Ava had not been located. Not by his men. Not by the private investigators. Not by anyone. And the woman standing in front of him, this broken, terrified woman with storm water in her hair and bruises that told their own story of violence, had done what all of Boston's criminal underworld could not do. She had found her. She had protected her. She had asked for nothing. Meanwhile, across the city, in an office on the 42nd floor of a downtown building, a man named Harold Brennan was pouring himself a glass of scotch with trembling hands. Harold was 54. With the kind of face that came from years of smiling at the right people and looking away from the wrong ones. He wore an expensive suit that hung slightly loose on his frame, a suit that had fit him much better before the stress settled into his bones like a permanent resident. His hair was dyed to cover the gray, a shade too dark, making him look perpetually guilty. He was guilty. Next to him sat Evelyn Blackwell, the owner of the Meridian Hotel, a woman in her early 60s with sharp cheekbones and harder eyes. She wore a black dress that cost more than Cassandra Morales earned in 2 months, and diamonds that caught the light like weaponized ice. Her gray hair was styled so perfectly it looked like a helmet. "The girl was here," Evelyn said. Not a question. A statement of fact delivered with the weight of something irrevocable. "I don't know anything about any girl," Harold said. But his voice cracked on the word girl. One of the night staff saw Vincent Conti in the lobby. With a child. With a woman who matches the description of that waitress you've been stealing from. Evelyn leaned back in her chair. The waitress with the $200 account balance and the grace to keep her mouth shut about the missing tips. Harold's glass made a soft clicking sound as he set it down. "What do you want me to do?" he asked. Evelyn smiled. It was not a warm expression. "I want you to understand that we have exactly 7 days before the creditors move on her foreclosure. 7 days before she loses everything. And I want you to ensure that she has no one to run to when it happens." Outside the office windows, the storm continued its work, tearing through Boston like something with a purpose. And 7 blocks away, in a small apartment with water-stained walls and windows that did not quite close properly, Cassandra Morales had left her keys on the kitchen table next to a notice that had arrived that morning. The notice was printed in official language, but what it said in plain terms was, "You have 7 days." 7 days to pay $300,000 she did not have. 7 days before everything ended. She did not know that her life was about to change completely. She did not know that the man in the marble lobby was Vincent Conti, whose name was spoken in certain circles the way people speak of natural disasters or equations that cannot be solved. She did not know that she had just made a decision that would save a missing child and destroy everything the man called Vincent had been building for 15 years. All she knew was that her eye hurt, her throat hurt, and there was a small child holding her hand like it was the only solid thing left in a world of water and falling sky. The storm roared on above the city, and somewhere in the darkness, the machinery of consequence began to turn. 2 days before the storm arrived at the Meridian Hotel, Cassandra Morales sat at a kitchen table the size of a showbox and counted her money for the 3rd time that morning. The bills were worn soft from handling, and she spread them out with the precision of someone performing a ritual she had performed 1,000 times before. $200. She moved them into different arrangements, as if the pattern might somehow change the sum. It did not. The apartment around her was small enough that she could touch both walls if she stood in the center and stretched her arms. Water stains bloomed across the ceiling like dark flowers, and the window facing the street did not quite close, leaving a gap where the August heat pressed in thick and wet and suffocating. The eviction notice was taped to her door. She had read it so many times the words had stopped meaning anything. $300,000 owed. Final warning. 7 days remaining. The paper was official and white and impossible. 8 months ago, her husband Miguel had died in a construction accident. He had fallen from a scaffold on a Tuesday afternoon at 3 o'clock, and when the hospital called, they told her that his injuries were incompatible with life, which was a clinical way of saying that he was already gone before his body hit the ground. What they did not tell her until 3 weeks later, when men in dark cars began arriving at her apartment, was that Miguel had owed $300,000 to people who did not accept the excuse of death. Loan sharks. Gambling debts. Money borrowed against odds that had never favored him. The debt had become hers by marriage. It did not matter that she had known nothing about it. It did not matter that she had been working 60-hour weeks while he spiraled. The debt was hers now. The apartment would be seized in 7 days. Everything would be gone. Her phone buzzed on the counter. A text message from an unknown number, final notice. Payment due immediately or legal action will commence. She did not read the rest. The Meridian Hotel stood in downtown Boston, all marble and mirrors and lighting that made everything look simultaneously bright and hollow. Cassandra arrived at 5 o'clock on a Tuesday evening, her uniform pressed and her name tag clipped to her collar. The name tag had come with the job 3 years ago, before Miguel died, before the debts began their relentless multiplication. She had worked at the hotel for longer than she had been married, and she would work there until the creditors took it all away or she found a way to make $300,000 appear from nothing. Harold Brennan was waiting in the hallway near the staff storage room. He was a man in his mid-50s with graying hair that he combed back with something that made it shine too much, and his tie was the color of old coffee with stains that suggested he had worn it since Monday. He was her manager, which meant he had the authority to terminate her employment. He had reminded her of this fact approximately 300 times in the past 6 months. "Cassandra," he said, and his voice had that particular texture it took on when he was about to lie. "I need to talk to you about something." He blocked the doorway to the storage room, his body positioned in a way that made it clear he did not intend to move. "Your tips from last week. I need to process them through the system. Regulations." She knew this was false. She had watched him pocket tips for 6 months. $40 here, $50 there, small amounts that added up like drops filling a basin. She had counted on that money. Every dollar had been earmarked. $3 for groceries. $5 for the electric bill that was 30 days overdue. $2 for the medicine her back needed after the double shifts bent her spine into permanent curves. "Mr. Brennan," she said, and her voice came out smaller than she intended. "I need that money. I'm counting every dollar." His face changed. The expression that crossed it was not anger exactly. It was something colder, something that did not require anger to be dangerous. You accusing me of something, Cassandra? Because I can have you fired by morning. Do you understand? I can tell corporate that you stole from the cash register. Do you know how hard it will be to find another job with that on your record? Try it. See where that gets you. There was no record. He was inventing one. She knew this. But he also knew that she could not afford to lose this job, and that knowledge was written in the way he smiled. No, she whispered. I'm not accusing you. I'm sorry. I just what? Struggling? Everyone's struggling, Cassandra. That's not my problem. He stepped closer, and the space between them became smaller, more dangerous. You keep your mouth shut about the tips, you keep your job. You keep quiet, you get paid Friday like everyone else. You understand? She nodded because nodding was easier than speaking. The prior Sunday, her only free day, Cassandra had gone to the Dorchester Avenue shelter. She had been volunteering there for 2 years, serving breakfast and cleaning tables, work that paid nothing but filled the hours that might have otherwise been occupied by despair. The shelter was a grey building with windows that needed washing and a kitchen that always smelled like instant coffee and something beneath it, something like mold growing in the walls. A small girl was sitting alone in the corner of the dining hall. She was perhaps 6 years old, with dark hair and eyes that did not track movement the way eyes usually did. The girl's hands were folded in her lap, and she was not eating, just sitting with the kind of stillness that only small children who have learned not to be noticed can manage. Cassandra sat down across from her. She did not introduce herself immediately. She had learned that children who were frightened needed time, needed gentleness, needed to understand that they were safe before they could accept kindness. My name is Cassandra, she said after a long moment of silence. What's your name? The girl's head turned slightly toward the sound of her voice. Ava, the child said, barely audible. Then, as if she had given away too much, she turned away again. Ava is a beautiful name, Cassandra said. She sat very still, the way you sit near a frightened animal. Do you like butterflies, Ava? The girl's head turned back. Her eyes, though unseeing, seemed to focus in Cassandra's direction. I can't see butterflies. I know, Cassandra said. But you can feel them. They're very light, like they weigh almost nothing. Like they're made of air that learned how to fly. She had brought butterfly stickers in her pocket, laminated things with ridged edges. She placed one in Ava's hand, and the girl's fingers moved across the surface, learning its shape by touch. When Ava smiled, it was the first smile Cassandra had seen on her face, and it was so fragile that it seemed like it might break if anyone breathed too hard. Every Sunday after that, Cassandra made sure to sit with Ava. She did not ask where the girl came from. She did not ask why no one came to claim her. The shelter director said only that Ava had appeared 3 weeks ago, wandering the streets, refusing to speak to anyone until Cassandra had sat down across from her and offered a butterfly sticker. Now the girl kept those stickers in a small cloth bag that she carried everywhere. When Cassandra asked her why, Ava said, "So I know I'm still here." On the Tuesday when Cassandra received the 2-day notice, she did not go to work at the hotel. She stayed in her apartment and sat at the kitchen table again, with the $200 spread out in front of her like a final inventory of everything she possessed. The apartment was so quiet that she could hear the water damage in the ceiling, the slow drip from the leak that had started months ago and that she could not afford to fix. Drip. 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 Each sound like a tiny bell marking the passage of time. Her phone buzzed. Another message. Another final notice. Another demand for money that did not exist. She thought about Ava sitting alone in the shelter, learning the world through touch, never asking for more than a butterfly sticker. She thought about Miguel, whose gambling debts had become her prison. She thought about Harold Brennan's cold smile when he told her that a lie could destroy her as easily as truth could destroy anyone else. $300,000. 7 days. $200 in her pocket. The mathematics of impossibility. Across the city, in a law office on the 43rd floor of a building made of glass and ambition, a woman named Evelyn Blackwell sat behind a desk so expensive that it had probably cost more than Cassandra's annual salary. Evelyn was in her early 60s, with grey hair cut in a way that suggested both money and intentions, and her fingers were covered in rings that caught the afternoon light. She was the owner of the Meridian Hotel, the woman whose name appeared in the legal documents that were slowly dismantling Cassandra Morales' life. Harold Brennan had called her that morning. He had whispered his concerns into a phone, and Evelyn had listened with the patience of someone who had heard thousands of confessions from people desperate to keep their jobs. When he finished, she had said only, "Leave it to me." What she meant was that she would tighten the noose. What she meant was that she could afford to wait exactly 7 days. The thunderstorm arrived without warning, the way violence always does. The sky above Boston turned the color of a bruise, dark purple bleeding into black, and the rain came down like bullets fired from heaven itself. Lightning cracked so close the lights in the Meridian Hotel lobby flickered and died for 3 full seconds. Guests scattered like startled birds. Cassandra Morales stood frozen near the mahogany bar, a silver tray of champagne flutes trembling in her hands, and in that moment of darkness she understood something with absolute certainty: her life was about to break open like an egg in a fist. The pain in her throat came first. A rope of fire. She could feel the fingerprints blooming dark purple across her skin, each one a perfect bruise, a perfect record of what happened in the storage room 7 minutes ago. Her left eye had swollen shut completely. When she blinked the right one, the world tilted sideways, doubled, and came back wrong. She tasted blood. Metallic. Warm. The copper flavor of survival. Harold Brennan had done this. The manager of the Meridian, the man with slicked back hair and a gold watch that cost more than her monthly rent, had cornered her between the boxes of napkins and the industrial shelving units. "You've been talking about me," he had said, his voice low and shaking with rage. "You've been saying I steal." She had denied it at first. She had said nothing, actually. But denial meant nothing to Harold. What mattered was that she had finally refused to stay silent when he pocketed her tips. What mattered was that she had whispered the truth to one of the other waitresses, and that whisper had traveled through the kitchen like a virus, and Harold had heard. His right hand had grabbed her wrist. She remembered the exact pressure of his fingers, the way they dug into the soft inside of her arm, crushing the delicate bones there. He had slammed her back against the metal shelving unit so hard that stars exploded across her vision. Her head struck something sharp. She heard a crack that might have been a shelf bracket or might have been her own skull. The distinction seemed unimportant. "You think you can threaten me?" His voice had been a low growl, the voice of a man who had done this before, who knew the exact angles of a storage room where no one would hear. "You're nothing. You understand that? Nothing. A waitress. A widow. Your husband was a gambling addict who drank himself into an early grave, and you're following right behind him." The words cut deeper than his hands. She had tried to pull away. She had clawed at his face, her fingernails drawing a thin line of blood across his cheekbone, and for one moment she had felt a flicker of hope. But then his hand had moved to her throat. His fingers had wrapped around her neck like a colonnade of iron, and he had squeezed. The world had gone white. Then red. Then a color that had no name. She had kicked him hard between the legs. He had doubled over, gasping, and she had stumbled past him, her uniform torn at the collar, her breath coming in short sharp whistles through a throat that felt like it had been replaced with broken glass. "You're fired!" Harold had screamed after her, his voice following her down the hallway like a curse. "And I'm calling the police. You attacked me, do you understand? I'm pressing charges. Assault. You attacked me. See how that works? See how nobody believes a waitress over a manager?" Now, standing in the lobby with her tray of champagne, she could feel him somewhere behind the kitchen door, probably calling the police right now, probably telling them a story that had just enough truth in it to be believed by anyone who wanted to believe it. The rain hammered against the lobby windows so hard they rattled in their frames. Thunder shook the building. The lights flickered again, steadied, and then she saw her. Ava sat on the leather sofa near the marble fireplace, her small body curled into the corner of the cushion. The child was 7 years old, with dark hair cut short just below her ears, and her eyes, her beautiful unseeing eyes, were turned toward the sound of the rain. Ava had learned the world through touch and sound and the vibrations of the earth beneath her feet. She had learned it the way blind children learn, with the certainty of someone who knows that the world makes sense even when it cannot be seen. The child's small hand reached out, searching, and found Cassandra's trembling fingers. "Miss Cassie." Ava's voice was barely a whisper, delicate as a candle flame. "You came back." Cassandra wanted to kneel down, wanted to gather the child into her arms and never let go. But she couldn't. Her throat wouldn't allow speech. Her eye wouldn't open. She was falling apart in front of a child who could not see her falling apart, and maybe that was the only mercy left in the world. A shadow moved behind Cassandra. A sound like expensive shoes crossing marble. The lobby went quiet. Even the rain seemed to pause, as if the entire city was holding its breath. Vincent Conti rose from the depths of the leather wingback chair in the corner, the chair so dark and deep that no one had noticed him sitting there. He was 6'2", broad-shouldered in a way that suggested he had been built for destruction and had simply maintained that shape through habit. His suit was charcoal gray, tailored so precisely that it had probably cost more than Cassandra's annual salary. His shirt was white and open at the collar, showing the muscular expanse of his chest, and across his jaw ran a single scar, thin and precise as a blade, running from the corner of his left eye to the edge of his jawline. His eyes were black. Not dark brown. Black. Like looking into a hole where light went to die. 2 men flanked him instantly, Rocco and Enzo, both 6'4", both dressed in identical black suits, both with the particular stillness of people trained to end violence rather than start it. In 15 years of working for Vincent Conti, neither man had ever seen him move faster than a leisurely walk. They had never heard him raise his voice. They had never seen him show the slightest interest in another human being except as a transaction, a problem to solve, a threat to neutralize. Vincent looked at Cassandra's face. He studied the swelling around her left eye, the purpling bruises blooming across her throat in the exact shape of a man's hands, the torn fabric of her uniform. Something moved behind his eyes. Something ancient and dangerous, like a predator waking from a long sleep. "You know my daughter." His voice was like thunder rolling across a distant ocean, low, deep, solid as an oath. Cassandra couldn't speak. She opened her mouth and nothing came out but a ragged whisper, the sound of sandpaper dragged across concrete. The shelter. I didn't know she was Ava." Vincent knelt beside his daughter with the careful movements of a much older man. "Is this the woman you told me about? The one who sat with you at night?" Ava's face lit up like someone had turned on the sun. "Yes. Miss Cassie sang songs. And she braided my hair. And she said I was brave." Vincent stood slowly. His gaze returned to Cassandra, and in that gaze was something that made her stomach drop like an elevator with cut cables. Harold Brennan emerged from the kitchen at exactly that moment, his face flushed red, his mouth already moving. "Mr. Conti, sir, I apologize for the disturbance. This employee was just terminated for theft and assault. She attacked me in the storage room." Vincent's head turned. One movement. One look. The words died in Harold's throat like insects dying in the beam of a flamethrower. "Get out of my sight," Vincent said quietly. Rocco stepped forward. One step. That was all it took. Harold stumbled backward, his shoes slipping on the wet marble floor, and he ran toward the service exit, his gold watch catching the light as he moved. The door slammed behind him. Vincent gestured toward a chair. "Sit." Cassandra Saturday. Ava curled up beside her, one small hand gripping her torn sleeve. The child was warm. Real. Alive. And for the first time in weeks, Cassandra felt something shift in her chest, not hope exactly, but the echo of hope, the ghost of what hope might look like. Vincent settled into the chair across from her, his elbows on his knees, his black eyes never leaving her face. "Tell me," he said. "Everything." The words spilled out of her like blood from a wound that would not close. She told him about Miguel, her husband, dead 8 months now from cirrhosis of the liver brought on by 30 years of drinking. She told him about the gambling debts Miguel had left behind, $300,000, a number so large it had never quite become real in her mind. 300,000. The words in sequence sounded like a foreign language. "The creditors call at midnight," she whispered, her voice cracking. "They call at 3 in the morning. They know my schedule at the shelter. They wait for the moments when I'm most exhausted. They say they'll take my kneecaps. They say they'll burn down the apartment. They say..." She didn't finish. She didn't need to. Vincent listened without interrupting. Rocco and Enzo exchanged a single glance, the kind of glance that only came after 15 years of shared silence. In that look was the recognition that something fundamental had changed. They had never seen their boss listen to anyone like this. Cassandra told him about the eviction notice. About the loan sharks. About Harold stealing her tips for 8 months while she worked double shifts to pay for rent she could never quite afford. She told him about the Meridian Hotel, about Evelyn Blackwell who owned it, about how Evelyn's name appeared in a legal document slowly dismantling her life. And then she told him about Ava. She appeared 3 weeks ago, Cassandra said, and her voice changed, became softer, became something that sounded almost like strength. She came to the shelter wet and cold and terrified. No one knew where she came from. But she trusted me. She let me bathe her, feed her, sit with her through the night. I sang her songs. She showed me how to see the world through touch. She looked down at the child curled against her side. I didn't know who she was. I didn't ask. She was just scared. Alone. So I stayed. That's all I did. Vincent leaned forward. The movement was slight, but it contained everything, his power, his intensity, his absolute focus. 3 weeks ago, he said, my daughter was kidnapped by people who wanted to destroy me. She was taken from school by men with guns. I had to choose between family and business, between safety and vengeance. I chose safety. I paid the ransom. I did everything they asked. He paused. The rain continued hammering against the windows. But Ava escaped. She found her way out of the building where they held her, and she stumbled into the streets of Boston blind and terrified. She could have died. She could have been found by anyone. Instead, she was found by you. Cassandra shook her head. I just did what anyone would do. No, Vincent said, and his voice was ice. You didn't. Most people would have called the police. Most people would have asked questions. Most people would have demanded answers before they offered kindness. You gave her 3 weeks of your life, everything you had, without asking for anything in return. He stood. Rocco immediately produced a business card, black and expensive looking. Vincent placed it on the small table between them. The $300,000, he said. Consider it handled. Your apartment, your debts, the loan sharks, all of it, gone by morning. Do not worry about money again. Cassandra's mouth fell open. The card lay on the table between them like a key to a door she didn't know existed. I can't. Why would you? Because my daughter is alive because of you. He lifted Ava gently, and the child hugged Cassandra so tight that she felt something break inside her chest, but it was the kind of breaking that comes before healing. Ava whispered something in her ear, words too soft for anyone else to hear, and then they were gone, Vincent and his men disappearing back into the shadows of the lobby like ghosts dissolving into fog. Cassandra sat alone in the empty chair, thunder still shaking the building, the prayer card she carried everywhere, a worn piece of cardboard with the Blessed Mother's image, her last connection to Miguel, still pressed against her heart. Outside, the rain continued to fall. 3 blocks away, in a penthouse office overlooking Boston Harbor, Evelyn Blackwell sat behind a desk made of glass and dark intentions. She was 63 years old, with grey hair pulled back so tightly it seemed to hurt, and her hands were covered in rings that caught the light like weapons. Her fingers were long and cold. Her eyes were colder still. Harold Brennan stood in front of her, soaking wet, trembling. "She's connected to Vincent Conti now," he said. Evelyn's expression didn't change. Then we accelerate. The sound of her pen clicking against the glass desktop was the only other noise in the room. Click! 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 Like a countdown timer in the darkness. The rain fell harder now, colder, as if the sky itself was drowning. Cassandra sat on the wooden bench in Boston Common, her body shaking violently, water streaming down her face so thick she couldn't tell where the rain ended and her tears began. Her uniform was soaked through. Her hands trembled so badly she could barely hold the phone she'd pulled from her pocket. The prayer card, the worn cardboard with the blessed mother's image, the last thing her mother ever gave her before the cancer took her, was dissolving in her jacket pocket, ink bleeding like watercolor into nothing. 2 weeks had passed since that night in the Meridian Hotel lobby. 2 weeks of what felt like a dream, money appearing in accounts, debts vanishing, guards standing silent outside her apartment door. 2 weeks of believing, maybe for the first time since Miguel died, that her life might actually turn into something other than a slow, grinding descent into nothing. Then the news came. She was watching it in Vincent's mansion, a place so far removed from her old world that even sitting on his leather sofa felt like trespassing, when Harold Brennan appeared on the television screen. He was standing outside a police precinct, cameras flashing, microphones shoved toward his face. His suit was perfectly pressed. His hair was perfectly styled. He looked like someone people should believe. This woman, he was saying, pointing at a photo of Cassandra's face blown up behind him, defrauded the Meridian Hotel of over $30,000. She manipulated our records, falsified her employment history, and used her position to steal from every guest who passed through our doors. The police chief stood beside him, nodding grimly. But that wasn't all. There were arrest warrants. Fabricated documents. A list of charges so long and so intricate that they seemed almost real, layered with the kind of specificity that only comes from someone who understands how systems work. Someone like Evelyn Blackwell. Then Evelyn herself appeared on screen, a segment from a Boston News interview recorded that morning. She was in her office, wearing a cream-colored suit that probably cost more than Cassandra made in 2 months. Her grey hair was perfect. Her expression was one of deep, wounded concern. "I took her in," Evelyn said, her voice carrying the weight of betrayal. "I gave her employment. I treated her like family. And what did she do? She manipulated my general manager, she stole from my guests, and when she realized she was going to be caught, she orchestrated a relationship with a known criminal to protect herself and silence us." The interview leaned forward. "Are you saying she's involved with organized crime?" "I'm saying," Evelyn replied slowly, "that desperate people do desperate things. And this woman used a child. She befriended Vincent Conti's daughter to gain access to him. That poor girl doesn't even know she was being manipulated." Cassandra watched her own face on the screen, a mug shot, harsh lighting, her eyes red and desperate looking. They must have pulled it from something. She didn't know where they'd gotten it. She didn't recognize the photo. The phone rang. Vincent, calling from New York where he was handling legitimate business interests, his empire was slowly transforming into something that could operate in daylight, something that wouldn't collapse the moment a prosecutor opened a file. "Don't watch," he said, his voice like thunder filtered through ice. "None of it is real. They're saying I stole from guests," she whispered. "They're saying I used Ava. I know. Your entire operation is on the news. Your daughter's face was just on television. There. I'm handling it." But Vincent was 300 miles away. And Cassandra was alone in a mansion that suddenly felt like a cage. She hung up the phone. She looked at herself in the massive window overlooking the city lights of Boston, and all she could see was a woman who had ruined everything she'd touched. A woman who brought danger to everyone who got close to her. A woman who didn't deserve this. Didn't deserve Vincent. Didn't deserve Ava's love. By evening, the mansion felt suffocating. The guards outside spoke into hidden earpieces. The television in every room carried her image like a virus. She couldn't breathe in that much money, that much protection, that much of someone else's world. So she left. She walked past the guards, men who had orders to protect her but no orders specific enough to stop her, and she walked into the summer night. Into the rain that had started again, colder than before, more vicious. Her feet carried her toward the only place in Boston where she'd ever felt even remotely at home, the Common. The park was nearly empty. The pond lay dark and still, like a mirror made of ink. She sat on the bench where she and Ava had fed ducks 3 weeks ago, before any of this had gotten so complicated, before the prayer card in her pocket had started to dissolve. She pulled it out now. The edges were soft, the ink running in blue streams across the cardboard. The blessed mother's face was beginning to blur. In another few minutes, it would be completely ruined. Maybe I deserve this, Cassandra said to the empty park. To the rain. To the night. Maybe Evelyn's right. Maybe I am nobody. She looked at the water. It was so still. So quiet. So final. She stood up. The ground beneath her was slippery with rain. The pond's edge was only 2 or 3 steps away. She'd been thinking about it for hours, in the car ride to the park, in the walk through the empty streets. How easy it would be to just stop fighting. To let the water take her and let Vincent's life go back to normal. He was a powerful man. He could survive her disappearance. Everyone could. 1 step forward. Then she heard it. A child's laugh. High and bright and completely out of place in the darkness. She turned. On the other side of the pond, under a streetlight, a little girl was jumping in puddles with her father. The girl was maybe Ava's age, soaking wet, her jacket clinging to her small body. The father was laughing too, lifting her up, spinning her so fast her feet left the ground. Both of them were drenched and joyful and alive in a way that had nothing to do with money or power or protection. Cassandra saw Ava's face in that child. Saw the moment the girl's hand had touched hers in the hotel lobby, the warmth of her small fingers, the way she'd said, "I recognize you from the shelter." Saw the night Ava had braided her hair by the fire in Vincent's study, humming a song in Italian that her mother had taught her. She stepped backward. Away from the edge. Her hands shook as she pulled out her phone. The screen lit up her face, rain-soaked and broken. She scrolled to Vincent's number. Her thumb hovered over it for a moment, just a moment, and then she pressed down. He answered on the first ring. "Cassandra." "I need help," she said, and her voice was barely there, a whisper like a candle in the wind. "I'm at the Common." "I need." "Where exactly?" "The pond. Near the east entrance." 20 minutes. "Stay on the line." She didn't stay on the line. She couldn't. But she sat back down on the bench, the dissolving prayer card still in her hand, and she waited for him. 16 minutes later, a black SUV pulled to the curb. The door opened. Vincent stepped out into the downpour without a jacket, without hesitation, his white dress shirt soaked through instantly, clinging to his chest. He walked toward her like a man moving through fire, and when he reached her, he didn't say anything at all. He just wrapped his cashmere coat around her shoulders, a coat worth more than her old apartment's annual rent, and he held her while she fell apart completely. "I've got you," he said, his voice solid like an oath. "No matter what they say, no matter what you believe about yourself right now, I've got you." She shook against his chest, rain and tears indistinguishable now. "They're saying I used Ava. They're saying. I know what they're saying. None of it will matter by tomorrow." He pulled back just far enough to look at her face. His eyes were dark as a storm, and burning with something that looked like rage and something that looked like love, and she couldn't separate the two. That same night, at exactly 3:36 in the morning, Vincent made a call. His voice was quiet, controlled, deadly. "Rocco. Enzo. It's time. The words traveled through the darkness like a blade cutting air. At the Meridian Hotel, 12 men in black tactical gear moved like ghosts through the corridors. No sirens. No warnings. No ceremony. They took Harold Brennan from his apartment above the lobby. He was in his underwear, screaming, begging, his perfect facade crumbling like wet paper. Rocco lifted him by the throat, his forearm solid like iron. "You put your hands on her," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "You threatened her. You fabricated charges against her to save your own skin." Harold's eyes went wide. His mouth opened and closed like a fish pulled from water. "Please," he gasped. "I was following orders. Evelyn made me do it. She threatened my family. Please, I was just—" Vincent stepped into the doorway. He was still wearing his soaked dress shirt. He looked like a man made of ice and fury. "I know," Vincent said. Harold's face went white. "Then you'll let me go." "No," Vincent replied, and the single word carried the weight of finality. "But I won't kill you. Death would be too quick. Too easy. Too merciful. You'll serve a purpose. You'll live." Harold was dragged screaming into the night, and he disappeared into a warehouse owned by the Salerno family, rivals who had wanted Evelyn Blackwell's territory for a decade. They took him into the darkness, and nothing more was ever heard from Harold Brennan again. But that was only half of it. At dawn, FBI agents began moving. They converged on Evelyn Blackwell's penthouse at 6:19 a.m., armed with search warrants and a mountain of evidence. Vincent had given them everything: 20 years of financial records, proof of money laundering, documentation of fraud, wire transfers connected to murders. Evidence so comprehensive, so undeniable, that there was nowhere left to hide. Evelyn was arrested in her silk bathrobe. Cameras flashed. She screamed at the agents escorting her out, "Do you know who I am? I own this city." An agent snapped handcuffs around her wrists. Not anymore. By evening, the headlines read like a symphony of justice. Meridian Hotel owner arrested in massive fraud scheme. Federal seizure of Blackwell properties. Within hours, every bank account was frozen. Every property was seized. Every connection was severed. Her face appeared on every screen in Boston, not as a powerful businesswoman, but as a criminal. The mighty were falling, and the city was watching. Evelyn Blackwell was sentenced to 40 years in federal prison. On her first night in a cell, she sat on a metal bunk in a 10 by 12 concrete room, and she understood finally what she had made of other people's lives. The weight of it pressed down on her like a coffin lid closing. Vincent stood in his mansion, watching the news broadcast of her arraignment. Cassandra was beside him, wrapped in a robe, her hair still damp from the shower, her hand steady now. The prayer card was gone, destroyed by the rain, but something else had taken its place. Something harder. Something certain. "Is it over?" she asked. Vincent turned to face her. In the morning light coming through the windows, she could see something she hadn't seen before: peace. Not the peace of victory, but the peace of a man who had protected what mattered, who had destroyed what threatened it, and who was finally ready to build something new. "Yes," he said. "It's over." She exhaled, and for the first time in weeks, the breath came from somewhere deep and safe. The mansion garden was flooded with golden sunlight, the kind that only arrives after months of waiting. Summer had finally broken through the cold Boston air, and everywhere there was the smell of roses, the white ones that Ava loved to touch, her small fingers tracing the delicate petals as if reading a story written in texture. The garden was alive in a way that nothing in Cassandra's old life had ever been alive. Children played on the grass, 8 of them, all from the shelter. Some were eating sandwiches on blankets. One was drawing with sidewalk chalk on the stone patio. And Ava moved between them like a small ambassador, her unseeing eyes bright with joy, describing colors she had never seen but understood through the voices of people who loved her. Vincent stood beside Cassandra at the edge of the garden. His hand rested on the small of her back, a gesture so natural and tender that Rocco, watching from a distance, felt something shift in his chest. In 15 years of working for Vincent Conti, he had never seen the man touch another person the way he touched Cassandra, not with possession, not with control, but like she was something precious that might break. Cassandra wore a simple white dress. The prayer card was in her pocket, laminated now, preserved against the weather that had nearly destroyed it. When she moved, she could feel it there like a talisman, a reminder of the night everything fractured and the morning everything rebuilt itself. "Look at her," Cassandra said, watching Ava help a younger boy open a juice box. 6 months ago, she was so afraid. So alone. "She had you," Vincent said. His voice was deep and steady, like an anchor dropping into still water. Even when she didn't know it. Cassandra turned to look at him. The scar that ran from the corner of his eye to his cheekbone caught the sunlight, silver-white against his dark skin. She had memorized that scar in the quiet moments they shared, tea in his study, walks through the mansion, nights when he read to Ava while Cassandra sat in the doorway, watching a man who had spent 2 decades learning how to be hard discover how to be gentle. "I wasn't trying to save her," Cassandra said. "I was just there." On the night the shelter was packed, and she was terrified of sleeping in the main room. "I had a cot in the office. I asked if she wanted to stay with me. That's all." Vincent's jaw tightened. "That's everything." They stood in silence for a moment. Enzo appeared with a tray of drinks, set them on the table, and withdrew without a word. The men had learned weeks ago not to interrupt these moments. Something sacred was happening in the slow rebuilding of 2 people who had known nothing but loss. Cassandra reached down and touched the prayer card through the fabric of her dress. She had done this 1,000 times since that thunderstorm night, touching it like a rosary, like proof that what happened was real. The notebook was gone now, destroyed by rain and time. Harold Brennan was in a federal penitentiary in Pennsylvania, serving 30 years for embezzlement, assault, and a dozen other charges that the federal prosecutors had stacked against him like a house of cards that finally fell. Evelyn Blackwell was 40 miles away in a women's facility in Massachusetts, her 40-year sentence a mirror to the 40 years she'd spent stealing from people like Cassandra. But the prayer card remained. Cassandra had laminated it because she needed something to hold onto that wasn't gratitude or obligation. It was faith. Raw, improbable, stubborn faith that the world could be kind. "Do you remember when you first arrived at the penthouse?" Vincent asked. "You wouldn't accept anything. Not the apartment, not the bank account. You thought it was payment for saving Ava." "It felt like it," Cassandra said. She watched Ava touch another child's hair, curious, gentle. "Like I was receiving a reward for something that was never meant to be transactional." Vincent turned to face her fully. "I didn't help you because I wanted something in return. I helped you because the moment I saw your face, covered in bruises, refusing to cry, I saw someone I recognized. Someone who had learned the same lesson I had learned, that the world is violent, and kindness is not a luxury, it's a rebellion." Cassandra's breath caught. He had never said anything like this before, not directly. They had danced around it for 6 months, conversations about Ava's schooling, about Cassandra's classes, about everything except the thing that lived between them in the silence. "I was afraid," she said. "When you kept your distance, I thought it was pity. That you were waiting for me to become more worthy, more whole." "No," Vincent said. His voice was like thunder now, rolling with something dangerous and tender at once. "I was waiting for you to realize that you never needed me to fix you. You were never broken. You were just bent under the weight of carrying other people's cruelty. And I wanted to watch you stand up straight again. I wanted to be certain that when you chose to stand beside me, it was because you wanted to, not because you had no other choice." Ava squealed from across the garden. One of the children had brought her a flower, something soft, probably a daisy. She held it against her face and laughed, the sound bright and unbroken. Cassandra pulled the prayer card from her pocket. It was worn now, the edges soft from being touched 1,000 times. She unfolded it and showed it to Vincent. The words were faded but still legible. "Lord, grant me the courage to help when I see suffering, even when I am suffering myself." Vincent read it in silence. Then he took it gently, held it between his hands like it was something holy. "I've spent 20 years destroying people who betrayed me. My brother sold our family to rivals for money. Do you know what my mother said before she died?" Cassandra shook her head. She said, "Vincent, don't let him teach you that mercy is weakness. Don't let him make you into something hard." And I didn't listen. I became exactly what he made me, ruthless, untrusting, alone. And then you walked into that lobby in a uniform torn at the collar, and you had already chosen mercy. You had already chosen to save my daughter when you had nothing to save yourself with. And that taught me something I spent 20 years unlearning." He tucked the prayer card back into her pocket, his hand lingering against her chest, over her heart. "I love you, Cassandra Morales. Not because you saved Ava. Not because I'm grateful. But because you showed me what strength actually looks like. You showed me that the strongest people are the ones who choose kindness when the world has given them every reason to choose vengeance." Cassandra felt tears sliding down her face. She had learned to cry again somewhere between the first night at the shelter and now, to let grief and joy move through her without trying to dam it up. "I love you too," she said. "And I'm not afraid anymore." Vincent drew her close. Rocco and Enzo exchanged a look across the garden, the kind of look that meant something had changed permanently. The boss, the man they had followed through violence and shadow and moral compromise, had finally found something worth protecting that didn't involve a gun. He kissed her there in the garden with the summer sun warming their skin and the sound of children playing in the background, and it tasted like redemption. Ava ran toward them, her small frame moving with complete confidence because she had learned to trust the world again. "Papa! Miss Cassie! Come see what we made." She grabbed both their hands and pulled them toward a sculpture made of stone and flowers that the children had assembled. "It's a family. That's for you and Miss Cassie and me. Because we're a family now, right?" Vincent knelt down to Ava's level. He took her small hand in his and placed it against his chest. "Yes, little one. We are a family now." And in that moment, something that had broken 20 years ago, something that had shattered when his brother betrayed them, when his mother died, when he learned that mercy was a liability, finally healed. 1 year later, after the rain, the sky clears. And sometimes miracles come from the most unexpected places. They come wrapped in a worn prayer card. They come from the hands of a woman who had nothing but chose to give. They come when a man finally understands that the greatest strength is not the strength to destroy your enemies, but the strength to protect what you love. If this story moved you, if it made you believe again in the possibility of redemption, drop a like right now. Share it with someone who needs to remember that their darkest moment might be the beginning of their greatest chapter. Subscribe because tomorrow we are bringing you another story that will restore your faith in unexpected miracles. Hit that notification bell. You will not want to miss what is coming next. Thank you for staying with us until the very end. Goodbye, and we will see you again in the next video.